Do you think animals like chickens have a thorough understanding of the concept of morality? Probably not. But it's animals like these, and in fact all other animals, that give us clues as to how our morality arises. I'll get back to that, but first I want to ask you another question. If morality doesn't have an objective basis, then how do you know what's right or wrong? Now, are you interested in the answer to that question? If you are, then you made a mistake. That's okay, we all do it. It's a trick question. You see, the words right and wrong are already objective. So to apply them to morality is to already treat morality as something objective. The question itself is predicated upon accepting morality's objectivity before you even give an answer. It would be like asking, if there isn't life after death, then what will you think about after you die? Now notice how in each question, the first part of the question can be dropped off. That's because they're rhetorical. These types of questions aren't asked by people who are actually interested in the answer. And they can use many different words that are reliant upon accepting the questioner's worldview. How do you know what's right or wrong, moral or immoral, good or evil, without an objective moral standard? In each case, we're presented with an objective dichotomy, as if it's the only option. Now, math problems have answers that are right or wrong, and we can use this kind of objectivity to accomplish amazing feats of science, like build space stations and cure diseases. But to take this kind of objectivity and try to apply it to morality is to do morality a great disservice, because when it comes to morality, right and wrong are context dependent, similar to the way right and wrong only exist in art within certain contexts. Whereas in science, 2 hydrogen atoms plus 1 oxygen atom will always equal 1 water molecule. That statement is right, correct. But is there a correct way to do art? Well, no. There are methods that are more efficient at achieving specific goals, and these methods carry with them hard evidence that they work. Are there better and worse ways to achieve the desired reaction to art? Sure, but that's very subjective, and like morality, the objectivity might only exist within the realm of harm versus benefit, and even that isn't always clear. So in order to determine the most beneficial methods, we must consider the evidence rather than blindly accepting a dogmatic view, which could actually lead to more harm than benefit if the evidence is ignored. A dogmatic view of the moral spectrum might look like this. At one end you have wrong or evil, and at the other end you have right or good. Now because this view is dogmatic, good and evil never shift. Good is always at this end, and evil is always at that end, never changing. And there are ends to the spectrum. At one end you have God, and at the other end you have no God, God's complete absence, or some believe the devil. Now this might seem like a good thing to have, a sort of moral compass we can all look to that always points toward the good, so that we can never be led astray. The problem is, if this view is inaccurate, our being led astray will be inevitable. For if that which is the beneficial thing to do is not static, then this view will eventually lead us to what will be the harmful thing to do. But not only that, unless God tells each and every one of us, literally or perhaps innately, what is moral, then anyone can abuse this spectrum by claiming to know what God wants. Now, many theists do believe that God has innately imbued us with morality and or told us through religious texts what is moral. But I'm going to provide some strong evidence to the contrary. So, what's the truth of the matter? Well, first of all, morality doesn't even exist unless there are two or more living things interacting. So, this tells us morality is an emergent property completely reliant on the interaction of living things. In other words, morality exists only when there's life and concerns only life. This means that morality at its most basic level boils down to that which benefits life versus that which harms life. Could this be considered objective? Possibly, but benefit and harm cannot be neatly placed upon the ends of a spectrum, for they are ever shifting depending upon the context of the situation. Sometimes that which is beneficial in one situation can become harmful in another, and vice versa. Therefore, it's up to us to examine the evidence and come to a determination based on that evidence. Now, just because we living things are the ones coming to this determination, it doesn't mean that anyone and everyone gets to decide what is moral. Hitler might have thought he was doing a good thing by exterminating the Jews, but in order to truly determine if he was causing more benefit than harm through his acts of genocide, he would have had to provide strong evidence that allowing Jews to live would cause more harm than killing them. And I think we can all agree that no such evidence existed. And if you disagree, then it's up to you to provide the evidence. Even a religious person who holds to a dogmatic view of morality cannot escape the reality of morality being determined by living things. For even in their dogmatic view, the ends of the spectrum are determined by people claiming to know about God's nature. This is especially dangerous because it makes us vulnerable to bad choices that are not to be questioned because they were made by people who are claiming divine authority. But how do we know that morality isn't innate? How do we know that it wasn't pre-programmed into us by God? Well, actually, ironically, of all the living things on this planet, human beings would be the last species to have any kind of innate knowledge. That's because, unlike other animals, our brains don't work that way. Morality has some obvious evolutionary implications, which end many people's questions about morality's origin, but I believe this is only part of the story. Human beings, a relatively weak species, would have had a very difficult time surviving and thriving if we didn't cooperate with each other, gaining strength from our numbers. Now, the need for survival causes the need for cooperation, which causes the need for congeniality and moral behavior. This is great evidence for why moral behavior is necessary for we humans, but I don't think this fact fully explains our morality's origin. Morality didn't just arise out of the blue because we needed it to survive. If every species got what they needed to survive, then nothing would go extinct. So we need to ask, what are the circumstances that caused moral behavior to arise? A good answer comes when we examine what has made humans thrive so well, our ability to adapt, the most important trait in evolutionary success. Our ability to adapt comes from our ability to learn. It is from our ability to learn that the concept of morality inadvertently arises. Being a learning species means that our brains have to be a certain way. Because evolution has shaped our brains to be learning-type brains, our brains are not conducive to the type of wiring required for a brain to have innate beliefs about the world. Unlike other species, when human beings are born, we have very few, if any, beliefs about the world. We still have yet to learn. Consider this. A 2-week-old chicken is far more intelligent and capable than a 2-week-old human. This is because chickens are a precocial species. They get to be independent far more quickly than humans. But that's because their brains are simple and their beliefs about the world are innate. They don't have learning-type brains. Humans, on the other hand, are an altricial species. In fact, the most altricial species, which means that we cannot survive on our own until many years after we are born. At first, this seems like it would be a disadvantage. This is the evolutionary trade-off of having a learning-type brain. A learning-type brain, like ours, requires time to learn. A major reason we don't get to be self-sufficient right away. But why isn't this long period of helplessness that all human beings endure not an evolutionary disadvantage? Because I believe it's during this helplessness that we learn moral behavior, which in turn helps us to cooperate, which is essential to our surviving and thriving. But how does this period of helplessness cause us to learn moral behavior? Well, think about it. First, it's during your youth that you learn the most. Your brain is like an information sponge, far more efficient at learning than an adult. And during those highly impressionable years, from day one, what do we experience? We experience our needs and wants being fulfilled by other human beings. For so long, we are completely reliant on other humans. This lesson is not forgotten. Through circumstance of our biology, we human beings spent significant portions of our lives being taken care of and taking care of other human beings. Now, because of our advanced cognitive abilities, we are one of the few species on this planet that can imagine complex scenarios, play them out in our minds, and draw conclusions from them. Our powerful imaginations allow us to empathize with other human beings, to imagine how they feel and think. Coupled with our mandatory allotment of being taken care of and, in turn, taking care of others, I think it should be fairly easy to see how our morality arises. Morality, according to our very biology, is not innate, it's learned. Taking a dogmatic view of determining moral action destroys discretion. Destroying discretion inhibits thought. Inhibiting thought stifles our morality's true origin.